Invest Africa, proudly brought to you by KPMG.
August is Women's Month in South Africa, and as we celebrate the contribution of women to society, we also look at women entrepreneurs and how to develop them on the continent. I'm Nozi Pombandra, and this is Invest Africa. Thank you for making the time to join us. Now, according to the United Nations, 4 out of every 10 workers globally are women, yet the majority have unsecure work and earn on average 20% less than their male counterparts. But in Africa, women are forging ahead. This is according to the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, where they say that women entrepreneurs in Africa are more multiple than in any other region. So what are we doing right on the continent, and how do we grow what we've gotten right? Now, according to the data that comes from the Entrepreneurship Monitor, we can see that TEA, which stands for Total Entrepreneurship Activity in Sub-Saharan Africa, outperforms any other developing region or developed region. However, the real point of interest, of course, is looking at established female entrepreneurs. And as we can see, all the red blocks are quite significantly lagging behind the blue box. Some of the questions that we're going to be uncovering in our conversation is what accounts for these differences, and of course, trying to unpack some of those cultural nuances that ensure that we have these patterns as they're showing. According to the study, which is across 67 economies, we see here that these are the 67 economies that have been listed, but right at the end we have Sub-Saharan Africa, and we can see here, according to the graph, that Sub-Saharan Africa still outperforms the rest of the developed and other parts of the developing world. Some areas of concern, of course, come from Asia, where we see very, very minimal activity when it comes to female entrepreneurs. Again, is this a cultural issue? Is it a mindset issue? Is it a fear of failure that we're seeing from women in that part of the world? Joining me now to discuss this is Janine Smith. She's a manager at Race Corp, the Business Incubator Program. Shelley Hunt, senior manager at KPMG Africa's High Growth Markets. And from Lagos, we are joined by personal finance expert Nimi Akenube. Ladies, thank you so much for making the time to join us. Shelley, let's start off with you and maybe look at the Sub-Saharan African region. We see outperformance. Why is it that women in Africa seem to have taken the baton when it comes to entrepreneurial activity?
You know, I think women have always played a crucial role in society, especially on the African continent. And now that there are opening opportunities on the continent, it's giving them more opportunities. There's also an element of that they are no longer entering into entrepreneurship for opportunity, but rather than necessity. We're looking at survivalist entrepreneurs. They are doing it out of providing for family, as well as other opportunities that have opened up. I think there have also been a large amount of structural changes, empowerment legislation, which has opened up a lot of doors for females on the continent. And we're also seeing a lot of women come into power in Africa. Joyce Banda of Malawi. Equality is not quite there, but the rise of women in power and the increase in equal rights for women has definitely played a contribution to the soaring number of entrepreneurs leading the way in Sub-Saharan Africa. I also think what's leading the way is communication and information transfer in Africa. Communicating the community and government and society in general that making women actively economically viable in a society is beneficial to everyone is important. This information and communication has been spread more quickly due to ICT developments and the flow of information and the connectivity that's happening in Africa. So I think those are a couple of reasons.
Multiple issues that you are raising there. But before we get into some of them, Janine, maybe let's go back to and try to understand the lagging behind of established businesses versus the startups that we're seeing in the entrepreneurial space. We're always hearing the stat that 8 out of every 10 startups are likely to fail. Is this higher for women, or are we more successful than men when it comes to transitioning from a startup to an established business?
I think women embrace the fact that there is this gap between them and men, and that drives them to actually be very successful. And I think as long as the mindset is there and they have the ambition, we see with the right role models in place, they realize they can do it. And also they're very open to learn, and they're also open to mentorship. And the combination of learning and mentorship is very powerful in their personal growth.
And maybe let's cross over to Nimi. Nimi, let's bring you in and bring in a voice from West Africa in particular, and just try to get a sense, because West Africa is one of those parts of the continent that's really entrepreneurial. The entrepreneurial energy is quite vibrant. How are women comparing to their male counterparts?
It's very, very exciting, the growth and the confidence, because women have been traditionally very risk averse. So you find that we're more tentative in our approach to business and so on. But the traditional sub-Saharan African woman has got the entrepreneurial spirit. So once some of the challenges can be addressed, I'm talking about things about coping with the work-life balance, because we are in a patriarchal society. So there's still the traditional role of the woman that people expect you to be at home looking after the kids and so on. So there isn't a lot of help in terms of how the woman can cope with both. But that is changing, and we have a lot of support now, some incredible organizations on the continent that are doing so much for women. I belong to a group called WIMBIZ, which is Women in Management and Business, who are having all kinds of programs to promote entrepreneurship among women, teaching them how to do a business plan, mentorship, all those sorts of things help a lot in building that confidence. And I think the growth in the next few years will be incredible.
Nimi, I'm quite certain that we're going to come back and maybe just visit some of those support strategies that have been most effective. But before we do that, Shelley, I want us to go back to the formal versus the informal divide and where female entrepreneurs are actually playing. Are they in the informal sector, or are we finding that the businesses that they're starting up are actually contributing to the mainstream economy?
You know, I think it's a bit of both. I think the formal sector perhaps sometimes lacks in confidence because it's not so much driven out of necessity, it's more the opportunity that's there. Whereas the number of women in the informal sector contributing to the economy is probably not accurately captured either. So it's quite a difficult one to determine. But I definitely think that both are contributing. I definitely think that both need a lot more assistance and support. I still think that they face similar but also extremely different challenges. And I think that given the right support, especially in the informal sector, those informal businesses can be leveraged into proper businesses which can contribute towards the economy.
Let's pick up on that, and in particular the point that Shelley raises that if we look at the informal sector, you need targeted, focused interventions to help these women sustain their businesses. What are some of the things that you think from an intervention perspective should be top of mind?
Well, generally a business owner knows their business, so they're experts, but they're not really equipped or skilled to take their business from that one-man show to a bigger enterprise where they're employing people, they're creating sustainability, they're building communities. So it's definitely an education process. It's vital because not all of us are equipped with these fundamental skills. So the empowering of knowledge, creating that confidence through training, through nurturing, through a support network, and also the type of encouragement they get from each other when they network in terms of meeting other entrepreneurs. The challenges are the same across different businesses. That also encourages them that they're not unique in what they do. So it's definitely a combination of many factors, but definitely a support structure around them.
Nimi, there's a point that Janine raised now about running your business as a one man or one woman show in this particular instance. And according to this report that's been done by Entrepreneurship Monitor, they say that women are actually unlikely to expand their businesses at the same rate that their male counterparts would, and we're likely to run a business on our own as against getting into the multiplier effect. Maybe give us a little bit of insight into that. Why is it that we're so reluctant to let others in?
I think that still comes back to the risk aversion, total fear of failure. And one of us just mentioned that the issue about education. That is critical because that is where we will get to build that confidence. And if more of us sort of take the time to nurture people coming up behind us, getting to understand, doing a business plan, understanding the financial issues, those are critical steps that one has to take for growth. Otherwise it stays as a one-man business and just does not evolve. And if we don't get these business plans right and can present our company properly and in a strong, methodical way, access to capital becomes almost impossible. which is a major area about growing. You know, women are finding it very, very difficult to be able to access capital. In the personal finance space, I've found that as well from my experience. Women are very, very tentative about their personal finances. And if you haven't been able to build some sorts of savings, some amount of savings, going into your own personal business is going to be very difficult, because you need to rely on friends, family, and your own savings to start your business venture, because the banks are reluctant to lend. That is improving. In Nigeria, we have some fantastic new initiatives from some of our local banks who have a targeted approach to women and are supporting entrepreneurs and small businesses, which is very exciting to see.
Shirley, access to finance, I think, is probably the biggest challenge that all entrepreneurs face.
Absolutely, it's not only women. But I think a critical problem that we're seeing in the access to finance is, I think a survey was done, and 7 out of 170 females interviewed were aware of development finance institutions offering finance to women, which shows that there is finance out there. It's just the awareness and marketing of it is not being directed to target audiences. And it's like if you have a product, accessibility to the product, if it's not made aware, the product is useless. So there are solutions being born. It's about that communication and that educating women about how they can get access to that finance, as well as support structures around that once they've got the finance, about how to manage it. And that's, again, comes back to education, training, mentorship and coaching.
I'm going to sound like a man just for 2 seconds, Janine, and maybe argue that maybe women are just not proactive enough. One would assume that any entrepreneur with a burning idea and an absolute desire to set up their own business, something that they're convinced about, is going to go out and find the finance and knock on doors and find out where the financing opportunities are. Are we doing that as women?
I don't think we can just limit it to women. You know, generally the entrepreneur has these great ideas, they're passionate, they're driven, they want to achieve, and they have this dream. They're not necessarily the type of people that have the ability to implement. You know, what's the foundation steps? What do we need to do? You know, how do you pitch to investors? And it's once again, I'm also going to sound like an old stuck record, is we come back to education, because it's actually being taught to pitch, taught to actually show that you're passionate about your business, that you have the confidence, so that an investor who's looking at this business feels that, yes, you know, I can believe in this dream and I can take it forward. So I don't think we can narrow it to women. We see it in you know, in men as well. It's that ability to convert that dream into a reality and actually approach the necessary investors and do it correctly.
On that point of converting dreams to reality, we're going to take a short break. But when we come back, we're going to be delving in a little bit deeper in how to cultivate women entrepreneurs. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're still watching Invest Africa. Remember that we do value your suggestions and your feedback. So please send us an email. That's to investafrica@abn360.com. And you can talk to us on Twitter by following @CNBC Africa, of course, using the show's hashtag, which is Invest Africa, and following me @Nozi Pombandra. Still with me, my guest, Janine Smith. She's a Prosperity Manager for Race Corp. Shirley Hunt, a Senior Manager at KPMG's Africa High Growth Markets. And from Lagos, we are joined by personal finance expert Nimi Akinugbe. Ladies, welcome back, and thank you for making the time, of course. Nimi, let's start off in Lagos in the second part of the conversation. And perhaps let's focus our attention not on the women in the startup space, but let's look at established businesses that are female-led, and maybe look into some of the considerations that women need to take as they try to expand across borders and maybe position their business as a regional player.
Well, I think a major issue, and there needs to be a lot more education in that area, is corporate governance. A lot of women have kept their businesses quite small and ignored many of the issues that will make it possible for them to be attractive enough to cross borders. So it comes back to, you know, doing things properly from day one. So the financials, the human resources, all those issues, so that they become more attractive to other businesses, can go into partnerships and so on. Another area is women don't take enough time to understand the financials in their businesses. So they're relying totally on their accountants and so on, whereas they should have a bit more interest and actually know that all that is going on, behind the figures and so on. So I think that's a major issue, seeking partnership, but really understanding the crux of your own business.
Janine, would you concur with that view that even at a leadership level, you need to be in touch with the nuts and bolts of the business, especially the financials?
Yes, I think if I just go back to that point of corporate governance, corporate governance in an SME environment where you're the entrepreneur, you're the technician, you're the manager, can be quite challenging. And it's actually to adapt those principles of governance or corporate governance into the SME environment where you're establishing accountability, transparency. And I definitely think that moving forward, it is important. We need to be in touch with our business. Not have it at arm's length. It's something that we need to know intimately in order to make sure that we are actually delivering.
Shirley, tracking back into the entrepreneurial space and staying though with this concept of corporate governance, when it comes to small businesses, we're looking really at putting in place systems and procedures that are eventually going to lead to a strong corporate governance structure. Is that happening, or is the focus really on revenue and being able to pay the people that you need to pay, and policies and procedures take a backseat really?
I think it is a phenomenon, but I don't think it's gender specific. I think where the growth in established businesses might vary from genders is perhaps obviously in the risk propensity of females, also in the speculative nature of females. They're passionate about the business that they started. I think they need to look beyond that and see what the markets are doing, what the client demands are. I heard a take on female confidence saying a man will take a job if he knows 30% of what's required of him. A woman won't take a job because she doesn't know 30% of what's required of her. And that just shows that women need to actually now go forth. I think only 1 in 5 female-led businesses in South Africa are exporting, as opposed to 1/3 of male businesses. So you can see we need to expand our businesses. Of course, having those corporate governance structures in place and understanding the financials behind them are obviously are important when taking that next step too.
And Nimi, let's look at the risk profile of women. And earlier on, you spoke about some of the household cultures or household factors that might make us not as attractive in the business space. To what extent is being a woman, with all the physical and the cultural expectations that come with being a woman, feeding into the risk profile as women try to access funding?
Well, I feel that it's changing in terms of the constraints that we've traditionally had in these sorts of societies where there's a traditional role of the woman. That is changing. Now, in terms of support that we're getting now, quite a few institutions have decided to have a focus. People have realized that if you empower the woman, you empower the family, you empower the community. And that has huge implications for economic growth of the country. So we're having a targeted approach now with companies actually focusing on women, which is very, very exciting. Access Bank recently launched the W initiative, and they're prepared to support women businesses, even businesses that are already in existence, and come in and actually guide as the business grows. We've got the Diamond Woman. Goldman Sachs have a fantastic program for female entrepreneurs that is held at the Lagos Business School. Women go into these courses for three months, and they're guided through all these issues that we're talking about. This makes them better equipped to be able to access financing and grow their businesses accordingly.
I heard an interesting stat that said the female economy is twice as big as the economy of China and India put together. Now, if that is true by any means, Janine, let's look forward. How should women be thinking about positioning themselves as serious business players so that the female economy that we're talking about, we're at the table, at the head of the table when it comes to it?
Well, I think women shouldn't be trying to compete with their male counterparts. We should see ourselves as unique, tap into those special powers that we have and the things that we're passionate about, and actually run our own race. And if we can think big and we can have that ambition and the right mindset, we can achieve anything. And as we can see with the right role models that are becoming more prevalent in Africa, we've got them there, and we just need to make sure that the generations that follow are actually empowered and will embark on that race. So I think we just need to educate once again. Is that even when we're coming back to that corporate governance, which seems to be the trend at the moment, it's the education, it's becoming aware of these things that actually in businesses make us grow and become, you know, and the transparency and all those little bits that contribute to being a profitable business. So I definitely think there's a great future ahead. And also by being that ultimate role model, we can empower the young women that follow us, you know, to...
I'm going to come back to the issue of role models because I think it keeps cropping up in our conversation. But very quickly, Shelley, before I do that, let's talk about how we shift those graphs that we spoke about earlier, and in particular, making sure that, you know, in future we're seeing an upsurge in women entrepreneurs. How should a young person who's, you know, on the one hand considering going into a structured career and not so sure about the corporate pathway, what should they be thinking about if they want to be part of the new solution?
Well, I think they'll know if they want to venture out, and obviously there are different reasons for becoming an entrepreneur. They either see the opportunity and will grab it, or there's a necessity which is slightly difficult to tackle around. But I think, again, it's about awareness. They've got to know the market, so they've got to make themselves aware of the size of the opportunity. They have to establish those networks and know what they want out of those networks. They've got to know what's available to them, whether it's in terms of financing, whether it's procurement spend of large companies that are targeted at women. They've got to do their research. They've got to do their homework. And I also think they've got to see it as not a female problem, or it's not even a problem, it's an issue, but it's an issue of society as a whole. Use your male counterparts. They've probably done a lot of prior experience in startups. Go and use them as mentorships and role models. And not to say that we shouldn't be using women in those roles, but men and society as a whole can definitely provide that support structure to take female businesses from startup and selling wares to a great global business.
Nimi, just to pick up on a point that Shelley's raised, and she's spoken about the procurement process. The experience in South Africa is that when you do see female-led businesses, they're really on the periphery of the business model. They are giving support services, and they're not really integrated in the core functioning of the business. To what extent is that a similar reflection in Nigeria in particular?
Yes, it is very similar. It's changing again, but it's still, most people are sort of operating on the periphery and not going into the mainstream. They just, I don't know, it's just something about not feeling they are ready for that. So you'll find some people working in the oil industry for several decades, and the men will leave the industry, leave the full-time employment, set up a company in the same industry and thrive. Whereas the women tend to leave completely. You find very few of them who actually stay within the industry. I'm not quite sure what happens with that. But another point I was going to make about the role modeling. There's a lot that mothers, women, can do for the younger generation in terms of even the way we approach bringing up our daughters, because many times families are treating the boy child differently from the girl child right from childhood. So there's already this sort of mindset being built as the child develops. We've got to change that. We've got to break that cycle where the girl child is the one that's got to help in the kitchen and the boy child is the one that's going to be the entrepreneur and so on. These mindsets are very, very powerful and very long-lasting. It even shows in the education, in terms of science education. Fewer girls will go into a career in the sciences or mathematics as opposed to boys. All these things can be addressed from a very early age.
If we're still seeing women in the periphery in terms of their role in larger businesses, would you then say that BE has failed to create female industrialists, and it has maybe conversely just created black male industrialists?
You know, I think we maybe as females haven't explored that opportunity we had, because it's definitely there for us to flourish. But going back to Mimi's point, I think it definitely is something that we need to address as mothers in terms of our children. You know, making sure that they realize that the opportunities are equal now. You know, we've moved from the lot of tradition where, you know, you've got to stay home and look after your husband for the rest of your time. Now, you know, so many women who are forced into being sole providers. So once again, the roles are changing and evolving, and I think we need to make sure that our children, you know, follow their dreams. And a very sad survey recently said most people leaving school now would rather go and work for government than start their own business. So what message are we sending out to the younger generations? So I think we need to look at it across the board in terms of creating that awareness and actually driving that entrepreneurial spirit instead of not being risk averse. Yeah.
Final question to you as we wrap up, Shelley. We've just had the establishment of the new of the Small Business Ministry, headed up by a woman as well, and to date, I haven't heard any particular focus or emphasis on assisting female-led businesses. If you could advise the Minister, what would you say to her?
Well, I think it's important to provide those structural changes so that there's a clear path on what females know, what is there for them and what support systems that they have. So one, make sure that there are those in place, and two, make sure that women are aware of them so that they can take up those opportunities. I think that's extremely important.
Well, on that note, we have come to the end of Invest Africa. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. And don't forget to send us your comments. The details are on the screen. But for now, Bruce Whitfield is standing by to bring you Tonight with Bruce. From myself and the Invest Africa team, it's goodbye.